December 1941, Hong Kong. The night air was thick with smoke and the distant rumble of artillery fire. Japanese forces were closing in, and a small group of Canadian soldiers huddled together in a makeshift bunker, their bodies broken, their hope fading. They had no idea that in the next 60 seconds, something would happen that would be talked about for the next 80 years. Something that would eventually earn one of the highest military honors ever given. But here's the thing. The hero of this story wasn't a soldier, wasn't a general, wasn't even human. What I'm about to tell you sounds like the plot of a Hollywood movie, but every single word is documented military history. A grenade came flying through the darkness, live, armed, seconds away from detonating and killing everyone in its radius. And in that moment, while trained soldiers froze in terror, someone else moved. Someone with 4 legs. Someone who understood, on some primal level, exactly what needed to be done. What happened next would be buried in classified military files for over 50 years. The soldiers who witnessed it would carry the memory to their graves, and the world wouldn't learn the full truth until decades later. This is not a story about war. This is a story about sacrifice, about loyalty that transcends species, about the moment when an animal made a choice that most humans couldn't. And trust me, you're not ready for how this ends. Before we get to that fateful night, you need to understand who we're talking about. His name was Gander. Originally, he was called Pal, just a regular Newfoundland dog living in a small Canadian town. Big, black, gentle as they come. But Gander wasn't always destined for military service. He started his life as a family pet. Kids in the neighborhood would climb on his back, pull his ears, treat him like a living playground. And Gander, he took it all with patience, with grace. But then something happened. One day, while playing with children, Gander accidentally scratched a kid's face. It wasn't aggression. It was just the reality of being a 170-pound dog with massive paws. But the family couldn't take that risk anymore. So they made a decision. They gave Gander away. Not to another family. Not to a shelter. They gave him to the Royal Rifles of Canada. And that single decision would change military history forever. The soldiers of the Royal Rifles didn't know what to do with a giant dog at first. Some laughed. Some complained. What were they supposed to do with this massive fur ball in the middle of military training? But something strange started happening. Gander began to change. He watched the soldiers drill. He followed them on marches. He sat at attention during formations as if he understood every command. The men started noticing something else, too. Whenever tensions rose, whenever voices got loud or conflicts broke out, Gander would position himself between the arguing soldiers. Calm, steady, watching. It was almost like he was training himself. The soldiers started joking that Gander was preparing for something. They promoted him to Sergeant Gander as a joke. But looking back now, with everything we know about what was coming, maybe Gander knew something they didn't. November 1941, the Royal Rifles received their orders. They were being deployed to Hong Kong, a strategic British colony in the Pacific. The mission seemed straightforward: reinforce the garrison and defend the island. Nobody told them they were walking into a death trap, and nobody asked if the dog should come along. But when the ships departed from Vancouver, Sergeant Gander was on board. The soldiers had grown too attached. He was their mascot, their good luck charm, their friend. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Japan was about to launch a massive attack across the Pacific. Pearl Harbor would happen on December 7th. Hong Kong would be invaded on December 8th. The timing was devastating. When Japanese forces stormed the island, the Canadian defenders were hopelessly outnumbered. They had roughly 2,000 soldiers, facing nearly 60,000 Japanese troops. It wasn't a battle. It was a massacre in slow motion. The fighting was brutal. Street by street, building by building, the Japanese army pushed forward with overwhelming force, and the Canadians fell back again and again. And through all of it, Gander stayed. He didn't run. He didn't hide. When Japanese soldiers advanced at night, Gander would charge at them, his black fur making him nearly invisible in the darkness, his massive size terrifying enemies who had never seen anything like him. If you're already hooked on this story, hit that subscribe button because what comes next is going to stay with you forever. Now I need to tell you something about Newfoundland dogs that most people don't know. These aren't ordinary animals. Newfoundlands were literally bred to save lives. For centuries, they worked alongside fishermen in the freezing waters of the North Atlantic. They pulled drowning sailors from the sea. They rescued children from frozen rivers. They dragged lifeboats through impossible currents. Saving lives isn't just something Newfoundlands do. It's coded into their DNA. And Gander? He was a perfect specimen of this ancient lineage. Over 170 pounds of muscle, loyalty, and instinct. But here's what made Gander different from every other dog in that war zone. He understood danger. Not just for himself, for his people. The soldiers would later describe how Gander would position himself between wounded men and incoming threats. How he would patrol the perimeter at night when the exhausted soldiers could barely keep their eyes open. He wasn't just a mascot anymore. He had become a guardian. The Japanese soldiers learned to fear the giant black dog that emerged from the shadows. There are documented accounts of Gander single-handedly stopping enemy advances just by charging at the attackers. But what nobody realized, not the Canadians, not the Japanese, not anyone, was that Gander wasn't just protecting his soldiers. He was building up to something. Every night patrol, every charge at the enemy, every time he positioned himself between danger and his wounded companions, it was all leading to one moment, one choice, one sacrifice that would define what it truly means to be loyal. And that moment was coming. The Battle of Hong Kong lasted 17 brutal days. 17 days of constant fighting. 17 days of watching friends die. 17 days of retreating, regrouping, and losing more ground. By mid-December, the situation was desperate. The Canadian forces were being pushed into smaller and smaller pockets of resistance. Ammunition was running low. Medical supplies were almost gone. And the wounded, there were so many wounded. The Japanese military showed no mercy. Prisoners were executed. Wounded soldiers were bayoneted where they lay. The horrors of those days would later be documented as some of the worst war crimes in Pacific theater history. And through it all, Gander worked. He would find wounded soldiers in the darkness and lead medics to their position. He would bark warnings when enemy patrols approached. He became so essential that the commanding officers started including him in their tactical discussions. But Gander was changing. The soldiers noticed it. The constant explosions, the gunfire, the screaming. It was taking a toll on him, just as it took a toll on them. Yet he never ran. One night, a group of wounded Canadian soldiers was pinned down near Limon Gap. They couldn't move. Japanese forces were closing in. The situation was hopeless. Gander appeared out of the darkness. Without any training, without any command, he charged directly at the approaching enemy soldiers. His massive black form came roaring out of the shadows like something from a nightmare. The Japanese patrol scattered. Gander had bought the wounded soldiers precious time to be evacuated. This happened not once, not twice, at least 3 documented times. Gander charged enemy positions and drove them back. He was wounded during these attacks. Cuts, bruises, minor injuries that would have sent other dogs running for safety. But Gander kept coming back. There's a moment in every war story where you realize the true character of the hero. For Gander, it wasn't one moment, it was a pattern. Every single time he had a choice between his own safety and his soldiers' lives, he chose them. Without hesitation, without training, without any reward, the soldiers started saying that Gander had more courage than most men they'd served with. But courage wasn't the right word. It was love. Pure, unconditional love for the men who had become his pack. And that love was about to be tested one final time. On the night of December 19th, 1941, Gander would make a choice that no one could have prepared for. A choice that would cost him everything. A choice that would save 7 men. December 19th, 1941, just days before Christmas. The situation had gone from desperate to catastrophic. Japanese forces had overrun most of Hong Kong. The British and Canadian defenders were making their last stand in isolated pockets across the island. Communication between units had broken down. Supplies were exhausted. The Royal Rifles were fighting for their lives near a position they were trying to hold against overwhelming odds. The night was chaos, gunfire from every direction, explosions lighting up the darkness, men screaming in pain and fear. A group of 7 wounded Canadian soldiers had taken shelter in a small depression in the ground. They couldn't move. Some had leg wounds. Others had been hit by shrapnel. One soldier was bleeding so badly that his companions were taking turns applying pressure to his wounds. They were sitting ducks. The Japanese knew they were there. Enemy soldiers were working their way closer, using the darkness as cover. Grenades had already been thrown in their general direction, near misses that showered them with dirt and debris. Gander was with them. He had positioned himself between the wounded men and the direction of the enemy advance. His ears were flat against his head. His body was low to the ground. Every muscle was tensed. The soldiers who could still see would later describe his expression. Alert, focused, like he was waiting for something. Then it happened. A Japanese soldier, close enough to have a clear throw, hurled a grenade directly at the group of wounded men. The soldiers saw it, that distinctive shape tumbling through the darkness toward them, the fuse already burning. 3 seconds, maybe 4. Not enough time to grab it, not enough time to run, not enough time to do anything but watch death coming. Time slowed down. One soldier closed his eyes. Another tried to shout a warning that caught in his throat. Another thought about his family back in Canada, the faces he would never see again. And then Gander moved, not away from the grenade, toward it, before any of the soldiers could process what was happening. The massive black dog had lunged forward, snatched a live grenade in his mouth, and started running, away from the wounded soldiers, away from his pack, away from safety. One soldier screamed. Another reached out as if he could somehow stop what was already in motion. But Gander was too fast. The dog ran into the darkness, carrying death in his jaws, running toward the Japanese lines, running toward the only place where the explosion wouldn't hurt his people. 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second. The grenade detonated. The explosion lit up the night. The soldiers felt the shockwave even from their protected position. Debris rained down around them, and then silence. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The reality of what had just happened was too enormous to process. Gander was gone. He had taken the blast. All of it, so that 7 men could live. One of the soldiers started crying. Another just stared into the darkness, where their protector had disappeared. A third whispered something that might have been a prayer. They were alive. All 7 of them. Because a dog had made a choice that defied every survival instinct, every biological imperative, every natural law of self-preservation. Gander had chosen them. Stories like Gander's deserve to be told. If you believe that too, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. I need you to understand something about what Gander did that night. It wasn't instinct. Dogs don't naturally grab dangerous objects and run away with them. There's no evolutionary reason for a dog to sacrifice itself for humans. No training program could have prepared Gander for that moment. What Gander did was a conscious choice. Think about it. He saw the grenade coming. He understood it was dangerous. He could have run away. He was faster than any of the wounded soldiers. He could have survived. But in that split second, something in Gander made a calculation that most humans couldn't make. 7 lives versus 1. His pack versus himself. And without hesitation, he chose them. Military historians have analyzed this moment for decades. Some say Gander was just reacting on instinct, treating the grenade like a thrown toy. But the soldiers who were there, the 7 men who watched their friend run into the darkness, they tell a different story. They say Gander looked back, just for a fraction of a second, as he started running. He turned his head toward the men he was protecting, like he wanted one last look, like he was saying goodbye. Then he was gone. The soldiers who survived that night carried Gander's sacrifice with them for the rest of their lives. In interviews decades later, when they were old men with grandchildren, they would still cry when talking about the dog who saved them. One veteran said something that stayed with me. I've been to church my whole life, and I've heard a lot of sermons about sacrifice, but I never truly understood what sacrifice meant until I watched Gander pick up that grenade. Another soldier put it even simpler. That dog loved us. He loved us more than he loved his own life, and we never got to thank him. The choice Gander made that night wasn't just about saving 7 soldiers. It was about proving that loyalty, true loyalty, knows no species. That love, true love, counts no cost. That heroism isn't about training or medals or recognition. It's about the moment when someone has the chance to save others by giving everything, and they take it. Gander took it, and 7 families in Canada got to welcome their sons back home because of a dog who never came home at all. Hong Kong fell on Christmas Day, 1941. The surviving Canadian soldiers became prisoners of war. They would spend nearly 4 years in brutal Japanese prison camps, enduring starvation, disease, forced labor, and unimaginable cruelty. But those 7 soldiers, the ones Gander saved, they survived. Not all of them made it through the prison camps. War is cruel like that, but some did. And when they finally returned to Canada in 1945, they carried Gander's story with them. For years, the story remained relatively unknown outside military circles. The soldiers talked about Gander among themselves. They told their families. They remembered him at reunions. But the wider world had no idea that one of the greatest acts of heroism in World War II had been performed by a dog. That changed in 2000. Almost 60 years after Gander's sacrifice, a movement began to officially recognize his heroism. Veterans groups, historians, and animal welfare organizations started pushing for Gander to receive proper military honors. And on October 27, 2000, Sergeant Gander was posthumously awarded the Dickin Medal. For those who don't know, the Dickin Medal is the animal equivalent of the Victoria Cross or the Medal of Honor. It's the highest military honor any animal can receive. The medal citation reads, "For saving the lives of Canadian infantrymen during the Battle of Hong Kong in December 1941. On 3 occasions, Gander engaged the enemy as grueling battle ensued. In the final act of a grueling battle, Gander was grueling killed in action, gathering a grenade hurled at Canadian wounded and running with it away from the soldiers." The ceremony was attended by surviving veterans of the Battle of Hong Kong. Men in their 80s and 90s, many in wheelchairs, gathered to finally see their friend honored. They say there wasn't a dry eye in the room. One veteran, Fred Kelly, was chosen to accept the medal on Gander's behalf. Kelly had been there that night. He had watched Gander make his final run. When they handed him the medal, he held it for a long moment, looking at the engraving. Then he said simply, "Good boy, Gander. Good boy." Today, Gander is remembered as one of the greatest animal heroes in military history. His story is taught in Canadian schools. There's a statue of him in his hometown of Gander, Newfoundland, the town that was renamed in his honor back in 1931. Yes, you heard that right. The town changed its name to Gander after the dog, even before his greatest act of heroism. Like destiny was already writing his story. The Hong Kong Veterans Memorial Wall includes Gander's name alongside the human soldiers who died in that battle. He's the only animal listed there. But maybe the most powerful legacy is simpler than monuments and medals. It's the families. Those 7 soldiers had children. Those children had children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, entire family trees that exist because of a decision made by a dog in the darkness of a December night. Hundreds of people alive today owe their existence to Gander. When you think about it that way, his sacrifice wasn't just about saving 7 men. It was about saving generations. And somewhere in Canada right now, there are children playing, going to school, living their lives, who have no idea that a giant Newfoundland dog is the reason their family exists. That's the thing about true heroism. It echoes. It ripples forward through time. It touches lives that haven't even been born yet. If Gander's story moved you, consider subscribing. We tell stories that matter, stories that deserve to never be forgotten. I've told a lot of stories on this channel. Stories about war, about survival, about moments that changed history. But Gander's story is different because it forces us to answer an uncomfortable question. What does it mean that a dog, an animal who couldn't speak, couldn't understand politics, couldn't comprehend the larger war being fought, showed more courage and love than most humans ever will? Gander didn't care about countries or flags or ideologies. He cared about his people, the men who fed him, who played with him, who gave him a home when his family gave him away. And when the moment came, when everything was on the line, he gave his life for them without a second thought. Maybe that's the lesson. Maybe in all our complexity, with all our words and philosophies and grand ideas about sacrifice and loyalty, we could learn something from a dog who understood it simply. Love the ones you're with. Protect them with everything you have. And when the darkness comes, run toward it, not away. Sergeant Gander did that. And 80 years later, we're still talking about him, still learning from him, still trying to live up to the example of a very good boy who became a hero. Rest easy, Gander. You earned it. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment telling me what you think about Gander's sacrifice. Share this video with someone who loves dogs or history. And if you haven't already, join our community by subscribing. Thank you for watching.